Human skeletal system consists of bones, ligaments, cartilage, and joints. Its main function is to provide support, movement, protection, storage, and production of blood cells. There are 206 bones in adults, and the infants have more bones which fuse over time. The function of the skeletal system is to provide support. It makes the skeleton of the body. It protects internal organs by creating rib cage and girdles. It helps in moving because it's attached with the skeletal muscles. It stores minerals, which are calcium and phosphorus. Hematopoiesis, which is the production of blood cells inside the bone from the bone marrow. The bone tissue is of two types: compact, which is very dense and strong, and it makes the outer layer and edge part of the bone, and spongy tissue, or the spongy bone, which is porous, lighter, and is towards the inner side of the bone. And it also contains spaces called the tuberculae, in which the bone marrow is present. The gross anatomy of a cell is the bulgier end part of a bone is called the epiphysis, and the length of the bone is the diaphysis. The inner part of the bone is a hollow cavity called the medullary cavity. Inside the medullary cavity, you have a yellow marrow, which mainly contains the fat. The outer covering of the bone is called periosteum. So osteo is related to bone, like osteocyte, osteons. Periosteum is the covering of bone, and endosteum is the inner covering or inner layer that lines the medullary cavity. Bone tissue is made up of repeated units of osteon. So osteon is this structure which has blood vessels and circular rings of osteocytes, or the bone cells around them. These osteocytes are the cells which are present in lacunae, and they communicate with the other osteocytes through the tiny channels called the canaliculi. These concentric rings of osteocytes, so if we keep on building these osteocytes inside their lacunae, they will make a ring. You can complete the idea here, called the lamellae. So there are mainly three different types of bone cells. The osteoblast cells are the bone forming cells. These are the cells that actually form the bone tissue. So they produce osteoids, which is the organic or the living part of the bone. Osteocytes produce bone matrix, which is mineralized part of the bone, where you have minerals like calcium and phosphorus. Osteoclasts are bone reabsorbing cells, so they reabsorb or break down the dead, decaying part of the bone tissue. Depending on shape, the bones can be classified as long bones. For example, what we see here in our leg, the femur and the humerus, and short bones, which you see in your hands, the carpals and tarsals, and you have flat bones in skull and in your sternum. Irregular bones are in your vertebral column, which are differently shaped, and then you have sesamoid bones, which are developed within the tendons, for example your kneecap or patella. The skeleton is studied in two different parts: the axial skeleton, which contains the skull and the vertebral column and the rib cage. So this runs through the axis of the body. Then appendicular are what are extending from the main axis of the body, that contains your limbs, your girdles, the shoulder girdle and your pelvic girdle, and they are kind of the extensions from your body. Skull includes the cranial bones um, over the brain and facial bones, which are in the face. Cranial bone protects your brain. They are frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal, um, and it includes 8 bones. And facial bones support your face. And important bones are, for example, the jaw bones, the maxilla and mandible, and your cheekbones, which are the zygomatic bones. In infants, the skull bones are not completely fused, but they have openings called the fontanelles. Over time, as the brain has grown enough and the skull can expand after attaining certain brain size, these skull bones start to fuse together, make an enclosed ball-like structure, and the fontanelles are then the fontanelles disappear. The vertebral column has 26 vertebrae. There are 7 in the cervical region, 12 in thoracic region, which helps in movement of your ribs, and there are 5 in the lumbar region, which provides support to your back, and then you have fused sacral and coccygeal bones. The first cervical bone is called atlas and second cervical bone is called axis, and these 2 bones help in rotating the head and in nodding. Your rib cage is built by ribs and sternum. There are in total 12 ribs. The first 7 ribs are called true ribs because they are directly attached with the sternum. The next 3 bones are called the false ribs because they are not directly but indirectly attached to sternum. And the next 2 bones are called the floating ribs because they do not attach with the sternum. The sternum is this middle piece in your chest, and it again has 3 main parts: the manubrium, body, and the xiphoid process. The appendicular skeleton includes limbs and girdle. So let's start from the top. First you have your shoulder girdle, also called the pectoral girdle. It has this collarbone called the clavicle and the shoulder blade called the scapula. In your arm you have humerus, radius, ulna, and in your wrist you have carpal, in your hand you have metacarpal, and then in your digits you have phalanges. Your pelvic girdle is this, which have ilium, ischium, and pubis, the 3 bones that make your pelvic girdle. Then your lower limb, your leg has this longest bone called the femur, and then you have tibia and fibula, just like you have radius and ulna in arm. Then you have tarsals, metatarsals, like you have carpals and metacarpals in hand, and in your toes you have phalanges, just like you have phalanges in your fingers. And you also have a kneecap called patella in your lower limb. Joints are the areas where 2 or more bones connect with each other, and they allow movement and provide stability to our skeletal system. The joints can be of different types depending on how freely the bones around them can move. The fibrous joints are the joints that connect your skull bones, and they are like sutures. They are kind of stitches between your skull bones, and they are immovable. They don't really move. Cartilaginous joints are slightly more movable. They are present in your vertebral column as intervertebral discs, and they help you move your vertebral column. That's why you are able to bend forward or backward. Synovial joints are the most freely movable joints. They allow movements in several different directions, and it's required for performing so many life functions. For example, the joints in your knees, shoulder, hips, So depending on the kind of movement or the plane of movement, the synovial joints are of further different types. The gliding one is the one in which one bone glides over the other, found in carpals and tarsals of hands and feet. Hinge bone or the hinge joint is present in your knee or elbow, and in this one bone is kind of rotating over the other bone in a hinge manner, like a door. Pivot is the joint here. One joint is kind of pivoting over the other bone, as is the connection between the first two cervical vertebra, and that helps with rotation of your head. Ellipsoid is the one present in your wrist, and in this is the kind of arrangement between the two bones. Saddle is in your thumb, and this is how the two bones glide over each other in saddle joint. And ball and socket joint is present in your shoulder and hip, and you can see how much is the range of motion of your shoulder and hip, where one bone is fitting like a ball into the other bone, which makes the socket. So how do bones grow and develop? The process of formation of bone is called ossification. In the beginning, you mostly have cartilages. As a newborn baby, there are mostly cartilages, although they do have bones as well, but it all starts as a cartilage. So in the cartilage, you have extracellular matrix, in which slowly you have deposition of minerals, and then they become more hard, and slowly, and with the deposition of these minerals, the cartilage turns into bones. Now you can see in the cartilage you don't have much blood supply, but as you have ossification or formation of bone going on, you have blood supply coming to the bones, and slowly you have minerals depositing in the bone, and finally the whole hard bone is formed. Depending on what kind of tissue they are formed from, the ossification can take place from cartilage or mesenchymal tissues to form the bones. Um, Epiphyseal plate is this region in the process of formation of bone which is still cartilaginous. So this gives the opportunity for bone to become bigger as the child grows, and this tissue keeps expanding. Once the person has attained their complete height, then more minerals are deposited in this area and the bone is formed. Then lengthening of bone is not possible unless the bone breaks, and then you have again some cartilage built in some part of the brain, and then the bone can increase its length. So that's what happens when the bones break and a repair happens. So let's see here, we see a fracture where the bone is broken. First of all, as an immune response, blood will come and create a hematoma here. You bring immune cells to make sure there is no infection in this area. Then the fibrocartilage starts building, and the cartilage is formed first. Then that cartilage has the extracellular matrix, in which you have slow deposition of minerals like calcium and phosphate, and then the bone callus is formed, and ultimately you have a bone formed in the area which was broken. Common disorders of bone are osteoporosis, which is the decrease in bone density. Sometimes it is related to aging or some premature disorders. It increases the risk of fractures. Osteoarthritis happens when the cartilage in your joints get degenerated, and you have deposition of some crystals in the cartilages. Rickets usually happen in children. It's a vitamin D deficiency disease in which the bones are weak, so they tend to bend outward or inward instead of growing straight in case of people who do not have vitamin deficiency. And then fractures are different kinds of breaks in the bones. depending on the shape of these breaks, the fractures are of different types. As we age, we lose the muscle mass. This increases the risk of fracture. It especially happens in the women after a menopause. A good idea is to have a calcium rich diet and supplement of vitamin D and weight training and exercise. So today we learned the function and classification of bones. We understood the difference between axial and appendicular skeleton. We learned how the bone structure is formed, how they grow and repair, and what could be the common disorders of bone and effect of aging on bones.